Trump assumed Canada would cave, but he was completely wrong. When he imposed tariffs on Canada, he probably expected some grumbling, maybe a little resistance. What he didn't anticipate was Canada hitting back with a move that could shake things up for the US in a way he never saw coming, by threatening US access to Alaska. That's right. A single bold decision by Canada could make Alaska feel a whole lot less American. But how did it come to this? And just how far could Canada push things? Let's take a closer look at the situation. Alaska is a massive state, covering 663,268 square miles of rugged wilderness, towering glaciers, and some of the most extreme geography in the country. But what's just as extreme is the fact that Alaska is one of only 2 US states that isn't directly connected to the lower 48. It's essentially a distant outpost of the United States, sitting far to the north, separated from the rest of the country by an international border and vast, untamed terrain. And guess who holds the key to keeping Alaska linked to the mainland US? Canada. The only way to reach Alaska by land from the continental US is through Canada, whether by road, rail, or even sea routes. Sure, air travel is an option, but it's not as simple as it seems. While some flights can go directly from US cities to Alaska, most still have to pass through Canadian airspace. So unless someone is willing to take a wildly inefficient detour, Canada's influence is impossible to ignore. This is even more crucial for land transportation. Alaska shares a massive 1,538-mile border with Canada, stretching from the Arctic Ocean down to the Pacific. Yukon and British Columbia sit on the eastern side of Alaska, forming a vital transit corridor that connects the state to the rest of the US. It's a vast, challenging landscape that makes most people wonder why anyone would choose to live there. But despite the isolation, around 740,000 people call Alaska home, and they've made it work against all odds. Let's talk about that border for a moment. Unlike many other international borders, the Canada-Alaska boundary is not a simple, neatly marked line. In some places, it's nearly invisible, like on the summit of Mount St. Elias, which rises to a staggering 18,008 feet. In other areas, it cuts through mountains and forests, requiring extraordinary efforts just to mark the boundary. The International Boundary Commission had to trek through some of the most remote and hostile terrain on Earth to establish the border, carving paths through thick forests and jagged peaks. Some markers are just metal cones placed on seemingly impassable landscapes, while in other areas, the boundary splits mountains where no one in their right mind would ever try to build anything. Despite the rugged nature of the border, it is critical to everything happening now. The difficulty of navigating the Canada-Alaska border only underscores the importance of roads connecting Alaska to Canada, and, in turn, the rest of the US. In many ways, Canada has a level of control over Alaska that no other country could ever claim, and Canada knows it. So, what is Canada doing with this power? Well, it's taking aim at trucks traveling between the US and Alaska. It's not the entire country taking this stance. It's primarily British Columbia, Canada's western stronghold. British Columbia is the crucial land link between Alaska and the rest of Canada, and without it, Alaska would be effectively cut off from land-based transportation networks. And British Columbia's Premier, David Eby, has a plan. He wants to impose tolls on commercial trucks moving through the province en route to Alaska. These tolls, essentially fees charged for using certain roads, bridges, or tunnels, are often used to fund infrastructure or manage traffic. But in this case, they're intended to limit US access to Alaska. If implemented, these fees could significantly increase the cost of shipping goods north, making transportation from the lower 48 more expensive and less efficient. It's a direct response to Trump's tariffs, and Eby isn't shy about making that clear. Although the tolls might not be enacted immediately, they serve as a warning. British Columbia is ready to make life harder for US truckers if economic tensions keep escalating. Canada isn't just going to sit back and take the hit without responding. And it's not just about money, this could create a serious logistical nightmare. Alaska relies on this land route for a huge portion of its goods, and without it, the state could face serious shortages. The biggest concerns: fresh produce and oil, according to Alaska State Senator Robert Myers. And Myers would know, he's a trucker himself. When asked about the tolls, he emphasized that if you need something delivered quickly in Alaska, you use a truck, not a barge. That said, Alaska isn't exactly flooded with trucks at all times. The number of trucks moving through the state is much lower than in the lower 48. According to the Alaska Trucking Association, trucks transport about 57.8% of the manufactured tonnage in Alaska, moving roughly 13,170 tons of goods per day. Unlike other states, where highways carry massive freight loads over long distances, Alaska's transportation network is more specialized. Most trucking activity in Alaska revolves around moving goods from seaports and airports to businesses and consumers rather than long-haul trips like in the rest of the U.S. Alaska's national highway system only includes 2,229 miles of designated roads, just 12.6% of the total public road network. It's a much smaller system, which means that while tolls would impact an essential segment of transport, they wouldn't completely cripple the state's economy, at least, not at first. But can British Columbia even enforce these tolls? Legally, it's a complicated issue. The biggest obstacle is an existing treaty between the U.S. and Canada, specifically covering the Alaska Highway. This 1,387-mile road, built during World War II as a military supply route, is now the main overland connection between Alaska and the rest of the U.S. The treaty explicitly prohibits Canada from imposing tolls on this highway for goods traveling between the U.S. and Alaska. Article 2 of the agreement states, Canada will not impose any highway toll, or permit any such toll to be charged for the use of such highways by vehicles or persons. This makes it crystal clear that tolls would be illegal under the agreement. Adding tolls would not only violate these terms but could also disrupt the cooperative infrastructure maintenance arrangement outlined in the treaty. British Columbia would face major diplomatic and legal pushback if it tried to implement tolls. But Eby seems determined to find a way around these barriers. He's a man on a mission, and legal or logistical hurdles aren't going to stop him. There are also significant technical challenges. Right now, British Columbia doesn't even have toll stations on the highways leading to Alaska. That's likely due to the treaty, but even if Canada found a legal loophole, setting up a toll system would require major infrastructure investments, including toll booths, staffing, and new regulations. Some officials, like Yukon's Premier Ranj Pillai, acknowledge that these challenges make implementation difficult. Others, like Myers, argue that it wouldn't be that hard, since trucks already stop at way stations, adding toll booths wouldn't be a major leap. Meanwhile, many Canadians are fully on board with these retaliatory moves. In Yukon, residents are proposing ideas to push back, from banning Alaska's athletes from the Arctic Winter Games to blocking Donald Trump Jr. from entering Canada. The message is clear: Canada won't back down. Even though Trump has eased some tariff threats, Eby insists, we will not tolerate these ongoing threats and uncertainty. We're standing up for Canadians. While the toll proposal remains mostly symbolic for now, it's sending a loud message: Canada is ready to fight back, and if the trade war escalates, Alaska could find itself caught in the middle.